So hi Yael, and thank you so much for joining me.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
So
Hi.
Yael is an alumni from the first cohort of the program. She comes from a background in psychology, and we'd love to hear a little more from you about the program and your experience, especially with the perspective of a new student, and what do you feel, would be interesting and relevant for them. Share the positives, the negative, whatever you feel like. It's totally fine.
Sure. So coming from a psychology background, I think had a lot of advantages. I think especially the first semester, we focused a lot on like research papers, and also we had a lot of psychology and cognitive based classes. So it was that was really helpful. And I also had a lot of trouble with the fabrication classes. Um, that was really difficult for me. I actually found that I ended up enjoying the coding classes a lot. Um, so I kind of went into it myself and even started like figuring out basic HTML. And then I found a course online that taught HTML and did that as well. So it was super interesting for me. And it kind of helped me because I was doing another course at the same time. So I could ask, the professor's questions if it came down to it. Um,
So from, let's say, that's one question that we get a lot from students that have no background in technology at well, and they're intimidated by the technical courses. They're also very curious because, they would love to know more about it, but they say, how can I be in a class together with a computer science students? How is it possible?
so first of all, I think this is the most important wasn't the most important for me. Sorry, is that I came from a psychology background, but there were a lot of people that came from a computer science background, and we taught each other. So a lot of the time I helped the computer science students with the psychology things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of the time they helped me with all the questions that I had for the coding courses and certain things that, I was stuck on a certain code and I needed help, and me and Amit sat down. I helped her with her thing. She helped me with mine, and it worked out really well. So I think that was the strongest factor for me that was super helpful, is learning from other perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
From computer science, also from com as well, in arts and humanities. So I think that was a super strong point. I don't think there's anything to be intimidated over in terms of technical limitations, because it did feel intimidating at the time, but I will say that you can take it at your own pace. So if something is not as clear to you, it's something that you can take at your own pace and learn at your own pace. And then there are other courses that you might feel that you know a lot about, and you can, decide to focus more on them, or or the opposite, focus more on the ones that you know less about. So it really depends. I think there's a lot of flexibility with, you know, what you don't know and what you want to put your focus into.
Okay. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I, hope for and plan in the program, that, for example, for a psychology student to learn coding is not in order to be a coder now, but it's in order to understand how coding works. And then maybe later on in your career, it might be helpful to understand what's going on. So right now, you already work in the industry, in a high-tech company, in a startup company. Do you feel that it's relevant and helpful, or it's not related at all?
It's definitely related. I'm working as a product manager, so a lot of the time I'm talking to developers, and I have to understand the basics of what they're talking about, right? Because if we're talking about front end or back end releases, if they're talking about APIs, I have to have a general understanding of what that means.
It's great
Otherwise,
to
I'd be
hear how
completely
you're saying
lost.
all of the terms with such confidence. It's great to hear.
No, because I had to understand them,
Yeah.
because at some point I couldn't have a discussion with them about this stuff otherwise. We're talking about a release, and if I had no clue.
Mm-hmm.
um so it was super useful, and also a lot of other small things. When I was working as a designer, it was also helpful to know what the basics was into what that went into coding an app, right? Because then if you build a design system, they want you to consider the developers in mind, and stuff like that. So it's super important to have that background, I think, even though you're
Okay.
not going to be a coder.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that it was hard or frustrating with the fabrication class. So you want to share a little more?
Sure. I'm not a work with my hands kind of person. I've always been a work, software person. So It was really, really hard for me to understand how to put things together, how to work on a machine and all of these things. It was super, super challenging, but I put in the effort that I could into it and learned as much as I could from it, but I didn't put the pressure on myself of, if I don't get this done, I'm going to fail. And it was just, okay, I'll learn what I can. And I did learn a lot, but personally for me, I knew that I was going into UX and product management, so it wasn't as much of a field that I was focused on anyway.
Okay. And another question is really about this broad focuses of the program versus being very focused on UX. So we deal with UX in the program, but we also teach a lot of other things, which are, the VR and the AR and the robotics and reading papers. Can you share a little more about maybe the seminar during the semester B or some other experience that is not UX related, and how was it for you?
Sure. I think for me, I saw VR as an opportunity to kind of explore things that I was interested in. A lot of the time, if it wasn't relevant to the industry, I saw the classes as sometimes an opportunity for me to explore something that I liked. So for me, I took it, into the scope of figuring out a safe space for, people with trauma. And that was super interesting for me, even though it wasn't going to go forward as an actual study at the end. And, Corona came up and all of that. It was very interesting to do.
And especially I know that a lot of psychology students are really drawn into VR because there's something in social interaction and VR that is fascinating. So,
yeah. I also know a lot of people that are very interested in the meditation aspect and all of that. So there's a lot of interesting aspects to it. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to want to go into VR to find it interesting.
Okay. And let's talk for a second again about your perspective from being a product manager in the industry right now, which is a very, challenging role to get into. Relatively, you're young, and it's really amazing, achievements that you were able to do it. So if you can share some recommendation and insights for other students that would say, I would love to be a product manager after the degree. So how can you help them get there?
I think part of it is kind of digesting everything, even though you might think that it might not be relevant. Try to digest what you can, because it really does end up being applicable to certain things. I would also say take advantage of the things that IDC offers. So there was a product hub. It's like not related to the degree, but it was a little club that we worked on. And they taught a lot about the basics of product. Mm-hmm. And then I was able to apply that when we had the product class at the end. So it kind of gave me a full understanding of things. So I would say in that sense, yeah, that's kind of like how I was able to, I feel, get this type of role, is kind of get all the different information. I also did a ton of research on my own a lot of the time,
And do you have any feedback for me on that sense? Like right now, when you have the perspective of the day-to-day that you do on your job, do you feel there are critical things that are missing in the program that you think it would be helpful, or learning it by yourself was the proper way anyway, or I don't know?
I think for me, learning it by myself was really helpful, but with certain things it wasn't. For example, the Arduino class. I had people who were around me who were, good with hardware. So it was, I got their help a lot of the time, and they helped me out and taught me what things were. But for someone who doesn't have that, that might, like you said, be intimidating. So I think maybe we did do that initially. I think in the coding classes, we had extra classes. So Omri would stay with us an extra hour after the classes and explain things from a super basic level. And I think that is something that could be really helpful, is providing those extra classes. The Figma class as well. I was learning it before, but it was helpful to have someone teach it anyway.
So all of the enrichment and the extra content.
Yeah. Yeah. I would also say maybe even basic ideas of like Illustrator and stuff like that, like a basic course in that would be super helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe another thing I'd love you to explain is about what product management is, because a lot of students ask about it, and I always describe it as a possible future career, but it's hard to define exactly what it is.
It's a lot of things. It's a lot of UX, honestly, in my role. I think it really depends on the company that you're working in and what field you come from. The role that I'm working in now, they wanted someone who knew design and UX. So because they had another product manager from a statistics background and another product manager from a business background. So we're kind of completing the circle. And that's kind of, I feel like, what product management is. It's a bunch of different things in one role. So I do feel that in terms of the UX aspect and the psychology aspect, and I also worked in gaming before, so I do have an understanding of that as well. I feel that, I'm there. But for example, in the technical aspect, I'm a little bit limited because, we have a meeting every day with the developers to talk about status updates and anything going on. And that's like the role of product is to plan out the week, kind of in very simple terms, plan out the week, decide what's the top priority, and then figure out any issues. And you're kind of like a problem solver throughout the week. Something comes up, try to resolve it. And a lot of the time you might be lacking certain technical understanding. The developers might say, I don't know how to make these endpoints, and you don't really know what that means. So it's also figuring out resources, who do I go to resolve this issue? How do I resolve it? I think it's a lot of problem solving. And I think that with certain people, especially in UX, you're a problem solver, and this is a huge part of it. So it helps to learn these things in the degree and then get there. I think that's why you eventually make that, move from UX into product.
And it's really interesting because we have, several alums from the program became product managers, but some come from technical background, some come from design background, and some come from psychology background. So maybe from the psychology perspective, what do you think is the advantage of a person that comes from psychology and become product manager?
I think you get to study people. I think a lot of it, first of all, is dealing with people all the time. And you have to understand, basically a big thing in product management is the art of saying no, right? Because the CEO and marketing and someone else will come up to you and they'll all have their ideas and they'll say, this has to happen right now. And you have to figure out how to prioritize all these things that they're, all these ideas that people are throwing at you, and then kind of figure out how to say no without really saying no, or, saying no and not upsetting them. So it's a lot of knowing how to deal with people. And I think that's a big part of it. And so I think that's an advantage.
Yeah, it's also really fascinating because a lot of people feel that product management, because it's in a startup company, they feel I'm always going to be in front of a computer. It's like a technical thing. I'm just going to deal with computer all the time. And it's really such a people person job.
It really is. It really is, because you're basically the communication point for everything. So marketing will come to you and say something and you'll relay it to the developers. You're kind of the middle person. So it is dealing a lot with people, for sure.
Okay, great. Excellent points. Anything else you feel might be helpful for, future applicants thinking about the, it's not only the program, but it's also the Israeli ecosystem, and, especially, students that come from other countries and think about, IDC as a school and Israel as a place to maybe find their career path?
Like I said, I think take advantage of IDC. There are a lot of resources. There's clubs that you can join. There's help with resumes. There's a ton of people that you can talk to. So take advantage of it and reach out if you need help, because there's a lot of people, there to listen. And I also think in the scope of jobs, use it as an advantage, because being an American might be scary, to go into the Israeli workforce, but it's actually a really big advantage because you have a very different perspective. And a lot of the time, their product is marketed towards Americans or whatever it might be. So a lot of the time you have that advantage, you have that viewpoint. So look at it as an advantage and market yourself that way, kind of. Yeah.
Sounds great. And can you just, final question, just tell a little more about your specific company and the specific product and,
Sure.
just a little bit about that.
Sure. So I'm from New York, so I've always wanted to work in fashion, and that was the design aspect for me. And this is a fashion company. They basically are an AI. It's a smart shopping assistant where they are able to inform you of you're able to save products that you like, and they inform you of all different deals and coupons and when prices go down and stuff. So it's kind of like that, but they want to go, you know, they want to build more and make it more of an AI. So they're working on that in terms of technology. Yeah, and I think that was a huge thing for me, is like an interesting mix of like design and technology and stuff, and it felt like it was a perfect fit. Yeah, I'm really
Sounds
happy.
really great. It's hard to find companies that are both design aware and society aware, you know, and culture aware, but also AI and advanced technology. So it's a really nice combination.
Definitely. Yeah, it is.
Okay, great to hear. Thank you so much, Yael, for joining and, you know, for sharing, you know, from your own experience, and lots
My
of good
pleasure.
luck in the next steps in your career.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye. Great seeing you.
Bye.